श्रीरूपं साग्रजातां सहगना रघुनाथान्वितां तां सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजना सहितं कृष्ण चैतन्य देवं श्री राधा कृष्ण पदान् सहगना ललिता श्री विशाखान्वितांश्च। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमोस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी श्री राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृष्ण भानु सुत देवे प्रणमामि हरिप्रिय। वाञ्छकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंदा। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. So we were discussing the 8th chapter, and I believe we have to start from verse 23 today. So I'll share my screen. Okay, are you all able to see my screen?
Yes, bro.
Okay, so let's recite this verse. You can repeat after me. Yatra kale tu anavrittam
Yatra kale tva anavrittam
avrittim chaiva yoginah
avrittim chaiva yoginah
prayatayanti tam kalam
prayatayanti tam kalam
vakshayami bharatarshava.
vakshayami bharatarshava.
Yatra kale tu anavrittim
Yatra kale tva anavrittim
avrittim chaiva yoginah
avrittim chaiva yoginah
prayatayanti tam kalam
prayatayanti tam kalam
vakshayami bharatarshava.
vakshayami bharatarshava.
Yatra kale tu anavrittim
Yatra kale tva anavrittim
avrittim chaiva yoginah
avrittim chaiva yoginah
prayatayanti tam kalam
prayatayanti tam kalam
vakshayami bharatarshava.
vakshayami bharatarshava.
Anyone else would like to recite?
Yatra kale tva anavrittim
Yatra kale tu anavrittim
avrittim chaiva yoginah
avrittim chaiva yoginah
prayatayanti tam kalam
prayatayanti tam kalam
vakshayami bharatarshava.
vakshayami bharatarshava.
Yatra kale tva anavrittim
Yatra kale tu anavrittim
avrittim chaiva yoginah
avrittim chaiva yoginah
prayatayanti tam kalam
prayatayanti tam kalam
vakshayami bharatarshava.
vakshayami bharatarshava. Anyone else?
Yatra kale tva anavrittam
Yatra kale tu anavrittim
avrittim chaiva yogina
avrittim chaiva yoginah
prayatayanti tam kalam
prayatayanti tam kalam
vakshayami bharatarshava.
vakshayami bharatarshava. That was excellent, Kwek Prabhu.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Otherwise, we can recite the synonyms.
Yatra kale tvanavrittim
Yatra kale tu anavrittim
avrittim chaiva yoginah
avrittim chaiva yoginah
prayati yanti tam kalam
prayatayanti tam kalam
vakshyami bharatarshava.
vakshayami bharatarshava. Okay, synonyms. Yatra,
Yatra,
at which.
at which.
Kale,
Kale,
time.
time.
Tu,
Tu,
and.
and.
Anavrittim,
Anavrittim,
no return.
no return.
Avrittim,
Avrittim,
return.
return.
Cha,
Cha,
also.
also.
Eva,
Eva,
certainly.
certainly.
Yogina,
Yogina,
different kinds of mystics.
different kinds of mystics.
Prayataha,
Prayata,
having departed.
having departed.
Yanti,
Yanti,
attain.
attain.
Tam,
Tam,
that.
that.
Kalam,
Kalam,
time.
time.
Vakshayami,
Vakshayami,
I shall describe.
I shall describe.
Bharatarshabha,
Bharatarshabha,
O best of the Bharatas.
or best of the Bharatas.
Translation and purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. O best of the Bharatas, I shall now explain to you the different times at which passing away from this world, the yogi does or does not come back. Purport. The unalloyed devotees of the Supreme Lord, who are totally surrendered souls, do not care when they leave their bodies or by what method. They leave everything in Krishna's hands and so easily and happily return to Godhead. But those who are not unalloyed devotees and who depend instead on such methods of spiritual realization as Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Hatha Yoga must leave the body at a suitable time in order to be sure of whether or not they will return to the world of birth and death. If the yogi is perfect, he can select the time and situation for leaving this material world. But if he is not so expert, his success depends on his accidentally passing away at a certain suitable time. The suitable times at which one passes away and does not come back are explained by the Lord in the next verse. According to Acharya Baladev Vidya Bhushan, the Sanskrit word Kal used herein refers to the presiding deity of time. नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्ण पृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिनीति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे. I read the translation one more time. O best of the Bharatas, I shall now explain to you the different times at which passing away from this world, the yogi does or does not come back. So we are now in a technical section of the 8th chapter where Krishna is going to speak about the auspicious and inauspicious time to depart. Of course, he is not talking about the devotees here. Prabhupada very expertly points out right at the beginning of his purport, he points out that this is not for the yogis. So we have already discussed that in the 8th chapter, Krishna is kind of comparing the path of Bhakti Yoga and the path of Ashtanga Yoga. So he had, if you remember, so what he had done is, first he talks about that how this place, this place is a place of misery and it is temporary, and then he kinds of explains that what is the misery, what is the temporary nature of this world. Abhur bhuvna loka punaravartino arjuna mamopete tu konte punarjanmana vidyate. So, he says that actually from the topmost planet of this world, of this universe, to the lowermost, bottommost planet, birth and death takes place. So the topmost is the Brahma Loka and the bottommost is, it's Patal Loka. So every planet, it is temporary. There is birth and there is death. But he says, Mamupette tu konteya punarjanmana vidyate, that if you attain me, then there will be no punarjanma. That means there will be no coming back to this world. And then he kinds of explains that how, the lifetime of Brahma, and then after Brahma's lifetime is over, there is a, pralaya that happens, there is destruction, and then everything goes back into the body of Mahavishnu, and then that's how he kinds of tells us the miserable and the temporary nature of this world. And then he talks about which verse we were discussing, 22nd. Yeah, so then he talks about his own spiritual world. He gives a glimpse again. Now, of course, he did mention it in the previous verses, but he gives a glimpse again. He says, Avyakta akshareti yuktas tam ahu paramam gatim yam prapina nivartante tad dhama paramam mama. He says that place, that supreme word of mine, which the Vedantists describe as unmanifest and infallible, that is the supreme destination. And if you attain that, yam prapya na nivartante, if you attain that, then you'll never come back. So The more details of this will come later in the 15th chapter. Krishna will say na tad bhasyate suryo na shashanko na pavakaha yad gatva na nivartante tad dhama paramam bhava. So this yad gatva, yad prapya, na nivartante, this theme will continue. So first he talks about an easier way to get there. So he says Purushaha sa paraha partha bhaktya labhyasto ananya yasyantah sthani bhutani yena sarvamidam tatam. That bhaktya labhyastu ananya. People who do ananya bhakti, for them, they can easily attain the supreme personality. They can go back to that destination very easily. But of course, now in the 23rd verse onwards, he is talking about an alternative path. So he is talking about the yogis, and as Srila Prabhupada points out, that it also applies to other yogis, not just the Ashtanga yogi. Who is not a bhakti yogi, it applies to them. So the point here is that either we rely on Krishna, and then Krishna will take care. So how we rely on Krishna is through unalloyed devotion. That's how Krishna describes in the 22nd verse, that if you are an unalloyed devotee, you don't have to worry about it. You will just come to me. And Krishna will say that again, if the end of this section, I think in the 25th verse, he'll say that again, that devotees do not worry about it. Although they know these two paths, but they don't care about it because they know that they will be taken care of. So either you rely on Krishna, that is like a transcendental shelter, that we are kind of assured that no matter what time or what way we leave the body, will be taken care of. But if you don't rely on Krishna, then you rely on some material mechanism. So now material mechanism, the material world, the material universe, it works according to certain laws, and it works according to certain techniques. So what the yogis do is, if you understand the path of yoga, Ashtanga yoga, so it is like a technique. So what the yoga does is, it sees the body in the forms of different chakras. So according to the yoga worldview, every worldview has a whole philosophy behind it. So the yoga path talks about the body. It says that there are different chakras in the body. So these chakras, of course, from a biological perspective, if you take an X-ray of the body or whatever way you can look inside the body, you won't find any chakras over there. If you just take a biological map, there are no chakras. But what the chakras mean from a yoga perspective, they are like centers of energy within the body. So the idea is that the prana vayu has to be raised from one chakra to another to another, and finally it has to come to the top of the topmost chakra, which is somewhere here. Of course, I'm not an expert yogi, so I can't exactly point it out. But then after the pranavayu is situated on the topmost chakra, then the yogi also, that is not enough actually. That's what Krishna also mentions. So he talks about yatra kale to anavrittim. So there are times at which, anavrittim and avrittim. Anavrittim means that not coming back. Avrittim means to come back, So he says that after doing all that, then the yogi also has to take care of at what particular time the yogi is departing from the body. Now, time, we understand that, not just in the Vedic context, even in the other traditions of the world, even in the Western tradition, we have, astrology is there. So the Vedic astrology is based on moon signs, and the Western astrology is based on sun signs. But the whole idea is that, even in the ancient traditions like the Mayan culture, they also believed on, that there are certain auspicious times and there are certain inauspicious times. So any culture of the world, most of the cultures that you take of the world, they do believe on this. So the whole study of, that when the stars are aligned in a particular way, and when the time is according to certain of their own calculations. Even if I was watching a documentary, this documentary is about the what was the empire, anyway, so this empire, they had attacked on one of the Christian kings. What is the empire's name? It's very famous. The Ottoman Empire. So they, if you look at them, even they believed on it. So they saw that when they did the final attack on the city, where this all the Christians were holding up, so they had a wall built, and the idea was that this wall cannot be breached. This wall is so strong. So this Ottoman king, he actually saw that the stars are aligned in a particular way, and there are very auspicious signs according to his own calculation. So he also apparently knew certain astrology as per how they used to follow it. And then he said that if we attack at this particular time, we, no matter how strong the wall is, we will be victorious. And actually it does happen like that, according to his calculations. And they were sitting outside that city for years, more than a year actually. They were not able to breach the wall. So the idea is that the time does have an important role. In the Vedic context, time is extremely important. We see that we have the astrology is considered one of the foremost science. In the Vedic times also, they will do things at particular times only. They won't do things randomly at any particular time. So in fact, the whole mathematics, it is one of the acharyas I was reading. He explains that the whole mathematics that was developed in the ancient times, it was developed to aid in this the whole study of astrology. So it's also mentioned. So I was watching another documentary of how mathematics was developed. So we know that Pythagoras theorem, it is very famous. But if you read the works of Pythagoras, all the books and everything that he has written, you will not find that theorem anywhere. So actually the Pythagoras theorem was discovered at least 2 generations. There was another mathematician, his name was Euclid. So he came 2 generations after Pythagoras. So he actually gave that theorem, and he attributed that theorem to Pythagoras. He said that in one of his talks, he has talked about it, and this talk has been coming down in parampara, and that's how I came to know about it. So, but this Pythagoras theorem, it is, if you see, a very similar kind of equation is also there in the Vedic texts, which were quite previous to when Pythagoras or Euclid were there. So there is something called as Shilba Sutras. So Shilba Sutras is actually geometry. So geometry is also required, to study astrology. Not just mathematics, even geometry is also required. So Shilba Sutras actually talk about geometry also. So Shilba Sutras, actually what it is how the fire altars should be constructed to do different kinds of fire sacrifices. So what we do today is we just put just some small pot somewhere in the room, and we'll put some wood, and we'll light it up, and we'll chant some mantra, and then we'll throw some stuff in it, and then we say it's a fire sacrifice. But actually in the Vedic times, that's not how the fire sacrifices were performed. It used to be huge. The fire altars were like, in one side of the fire altar, 100 brahmanas could sit, so that there are hundreds of brahmanas who will be simultaneously doing different kinds of, stuff for doing that fire sacrifice. And there are different shapes of the fire altars also. These different shapes were used to perform different kinds of fire sacrifices. So all this science was there even in the Vedic times. So now Krishna is going to talk about a particular time. Now he does say time here, but we'll see that how not just the time, there are other factors also that he'll talk about. But primarily it is time, but then again there are other factors also that he will mention here. The time also we understand in the Gita. So the 5 things that the 5 primary things that the Gita talk about is Jiva, Prakriti, Kal, Ishwar, and Karma. So these are the 5 things that Gita talk about. So Kal is a very important factor in Gita also. Time. So Krishna gives the definition of time twice in the Gita at 2 different places. Once he gives it in the 11th chapter, 32nd verse, Kalosmi Lokakshay Krit Pravadda. He says, I am time actually. I am time, the destroyer of the worlds. And then there's one other definition that comes in the 10th chapter, where he says that amongst the subduers or controllers, I am time. Kalaha Kalayatam Aham, something like that he mentions. I'm not exactly able to remember the verse. But so time is that which controls and time is that which destroys, according to the Gita. And that's how Krishna defines time. And because it controls, because it destroys, so the one of the very primary characteristic of time in the material world is the its ability to control things. It controls our life. We can't be sitting here and discussing Bhagavad Gita forever. We have only 1 hour, and if we just go beyond 1 hour, there are other things that start suffering. So time does control things. So but we also see that time is important in the material world, but not so much in the spiritual world. In fact, if you see in the Brahma Samhita, it is mentioned that not even time that is needed to blink our eye, even that much time does not pass in the spiritual world. Now that is very in one sense it is very alarming. How could time not pass in the spiritual world? There has to be some element of time. And actually Brahma Samhita does say that, but we do see in the writings of the acharyas, when they talk about the spiritual world, in fact, it is mentioned that the Raganuga Bhaktas, who are there, who are very elevated devotees. So what they do is, at different times of the day, they will meditate on those pastimes of Krishna that he will be performing in the spiritual world at that time. So in the morning, they will meditate on the pastimes that Krishna would usually perform in the spiritual world in the morning. So that means there is time, there is morning, there is evening, there is night, So what exactly it means is that, the ability of time to control things and destroy things, that is not present in the spiritual world. So time does control and destroy things in the material world, but in the spiritual world, time is not that important. Important in the sense, it is there to facilitate the different pastimes of the Lord, not so much to control and to destroy things. There is no destruction in the spiritual world. I was hearing a lecture from His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj. So he was quoting from one of the scriptures, or not scriptures, but one of the writings of one of the Shad Goswamis. So he was saying that the eternal age of Krishna, eternal age of Krishna in the spiritual world, I think he mentioned something like 15 years, 6 months, 3 days, something like that. That is the eternal age. Krishna doesn't go older than that. And he also mentioned something about Radharani's age, that this is the eternal age of Radharani. So the point is that, that is how they are. There are certain Gopas who are, they are very small, they're very little. Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda, they are actually of some middle age, and they're eternally like that. There are certain devotees who are old, there are certain which are middle age, and there are certain devotees who are like kids, and they are eternally like that. They don't grow old beyond that, and they don't encounter disease. Nothing like that is there in the spiritual world. That's how he was explaining. So the point is that in the spiritual world, this ability of time to control and destroy things is not there. But in the material world, time is of paramount importance. In fact, Krishna says that I am time. It is one of the energies of Krishna. And here, if we see, Prabhupada is making an important statement, in the purport we read. He says towards the end, last line, he says, according to Acharya Baldev Vidya Bhushan, the Sanskrit word Kal used herein refers to the presiding deity of time. So Kal has the presiding deity, but ultimately we understand that Krishna is controlling everything. Krishna also says in the 15th chapter of the Gita, Aham Vaishwanaro Bhutva Praninam Dehamashitaha Pranapana Samayuktaha Pachamyannam Chaturvidham. That, I am the digestive fire in the body of living entities, and actually I digest the food, the 4 kinds of food that the person eats. But Vaishwanaro, Aham Vaishwanaro Bhutva, he says. Vaishwanar is like a demigod who controls the digestion process. But Krishna says, I am that demigod. So the point is that Krishna is in one sense everything, because he controls everything. So here also the presiding deity of time, actually it is under the control of Krishna only. He is not something which is outside the control of Krishna. So that's how I have understood it. And now in the next few verses, Krishna is going to talk about the different times, and he will mention certain names of certain other demigods. We'll talk about it. But before that, are there any questions or comments or corrections or anything else, anything would like to add?
Wasn't there an story of Narada Muni going in Dwaraka and in the 16,000 palaces, and Krishna was doing different
Different
things, at different times.
palaces,
Also.
different palaces at the same time. He was doing different things.
But
So-
but in a sense, I thought it wasn't even like a different time, so to speak.
No, at the
It
same
was-
time, he was doing different things because he had manifested himself in 16,000 forms. So
Right.
in each of the palace, he was with different queens,
Mhm.
and then he was in one room, he was reading, in one room, he was, in one palace, he was doing, so he was eating.
Doing his
So
deity service or something like that.
exactly. So Narad Muni was bewildered that how could he do different things at the same time.
Same
Yeah,
time.
That pastime is there in the 10th canto.
Yeah.
I'm reading the 10th canto now. I've reached until chapter 24.
Oh, okay. So you know the exact thing.
So
that's happening.
so that pastime has not come yet. The Dwarka Lila has
Mhm.
not started. So I'm still in the Vrindavan. Of course, I've read that, but I've read it in the
Right,
Krishna
right,
book, but I'm
right.
reading it systematically now in the 10th canto.
Right. Even Narada Muni is bewildered seeing that,
Yeah.
And I was thinking, like you were saying, that time is facilitating Krishna's pastime. So if Krishna is enjoying in the, during springtime and under the rain will never stop. Right?
Yeah.
It'll continue because Krishna is enjoying it, with the gopis. So time is really facilitating Krishna's pastimes, is like you're saying,
Exactly. It's there.
So there is morning, there is, there's noon, there's evening and moonlight and everything, but basically there is no aging, like you said. There's no birth, death, or old age and disease, and and you are right. I mean, if someone like Nand Maharaj is of the same age, the older people are of the same age, right, with that mood of the pastime, but they're not really old, so to speak, right?
Yeah. So they don't have that, it's not that their body is debilitated because of the old age. They
Right,
are
right.
They can do everything which a normal person can do,
Normal person
but they
can do.
look old.
They might have gray hair, yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. But
but
their
nice
body is
shiny
not.
gray hair.
Right. So they look very attractive also. It's not that because
Exactly. Yeah.
so, in the material world, the old people, they become obsolete, in a sense that they become debilitated. They can't eat much.
Right.
They can't do much.
They're facilitating a pastime. Yeah.
Exactly. So the material logic doesn't apply in the spiritual realm.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So
Right.
that's the idea.
It's so amazing, isn't it?
Exactly. In fact, I was reading one of the, I forgot which Acharya's book I was reading. So he was saying that actually there are three different manifestations of Krishna in the spiritual world. So there is, so we know there is Paganda Roop, there is the Kishore Krishna, and then there is also the Bal Rupa. So he says that actually different devotees see Krishna in different forms. It's the same Krishna. He says that actually the Kumara Krishna, he is he is actually the original Krishna, the Rasa Vigraha. He is the original Krishna. But he
Kishore age, you're saying.
Right, Kishore age, whatever
Kishore
that.
age. Yeah.
So Radhanath Maharaj mentions 15 years, 6 months, or 3 days. I may be off a little bit, but other acharyas have given a little different. Like someone says 14 years, some other acharyas say, but it doesn't matter. It's just
Close to
matter
that,
of-
yeah. Teenage, yeah.
If we consider that there is no time in the spiritual world, it doesn't matter whether it's 14 years or
Right,
16 years.
exactly. Yeah.
So it's just for our own calculations.
And he looks youthful and beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm sorry, I lost the thread. What I was saying. Yeah, so Krishna actually manifests in three different manifestations in the spiritual world, and different devotees would see him in different forms. The same Krishna, Yashoda Mai and Nanda Maharaj would see him as, as a little Krishna, as Bala Krishna. Other devotees might see him as Paganda. His friends would see him as the Paganda form, because that's the form in
Mood
which,
they're in, yeah.
right. And then the
Gopis, yeah.
gopis, they would see him in the Kumar form.
Yeah.
So that's how it is. It's very amazing, in one sense. We can't comprehend
At the
it.
same time, huh?
Exactly, at the same time. The same Krishna would be seen differently by different devotees. Yeah, that's how
Wow.
it is explained.
Well, if Krishna can be with each of the gopis and each of the gopis can think that he's only with them, why not? Right?
Yeah. So, I mean, of course, we know that Yoga Maya is there and Yoga Maya can do anything that Krishna wants, but yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, in fact, I think one of the lectures Niranjan Maharaj is giving, he said sometimes Krishna forgets he's God and he's playing with his, with his friends. And then Yogamaya has to remind him that he's God. He has to go into his Aishwarya form for some reason. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That Krishna himself forgets he's God. And Yogamaya, I mean, like jokingly, he said, has to tap him on the shoulder and get him back into his Aishwarya, mood for something that he needs to do.
There was a article on it that came in the Back to Godhead magazine. So there they had given the analogy of a drama, that there are actors, there are directors, and there are script writers. So it's mentioned that Krishna and the gopis, they are like the actors, and Yogamaya is the director. But the script writer is Krishna himself. And he writes the script according to which the Yogamaya directs,
Right.
and the actor is Krishna. So, but the actors go so much into the role
play
that they forget.
that he forgets. Yeah.
That was a very nice
And then the director
analogy.
has to bring him back. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I forgot who wrote that article, which is very nice article.
Wow. Sounds really nice. Nice analogy.
Any other questions, comments, corrections? Okay, if not, let's discuss the next verse. So this section is technical, but also interesting. So let's recite this verse just once and then we can try to discuss it. Prabhupada writes a short purport here also. Agnir Jyotir Aha Shukla
Agnir Jyotir Ahashukla
Shanmasa Uttarayanam
Shanmasa Uttarayanam
Tatra Prayata Gachanti
Tatra Prayata Gachanti
Brahma Brahma Vido Janaha.
Brahma Brahma Vido Janaha.
Translation: those who know the Supreme Brahman attain that Supreme by passing away from the world during the influence of the fiery god in the light at an auspicious moment of the day, during the fortnight of the waxing moon, or during the 6 months when the sun travels in the north. Purport: when fire, light, day, and the fortnight of the moon are mentioned, it is to be understood that over all of them, there are various presiding deities who make arrangements for the passage of the soul. At the time of death, the mind carries one on the path to a new life. If one leaves the body at the time designated above, either accidentally or by arrangement, it is possible for him to attain the impersonal Brahma Jyotir. Mystics who are advanced in yoga practice can arrange the time and place to leave the body. Others have no control. If by accident they leave at an auspicious moment, then they will not return to the cycle of birth and death. But otherwise, there is every possibility that they will have to return. However, for the pure devotees in Krishna consciousness, there is no fear of returning, whether he leaves the body at an auspicious or inauspicious moment by accident or arrangement. So again, Prabhupada talks about that this is not about the devotees. This is for people other than the pure devotees. So Prabhupada adds that adjective. So we have to also see this pure devotee in Krishna consciousness. So we have to know whether we are pure or not. So translation, I'll read one more time. Those who know the Supreme Brahman attain that Supreme by passing away from the world during the influence of the fiery god in the light at an auspicious moment of the day, during the fortnight of the waxing moon, or during the 6 months when the sun travels in the north. So Prabhupada talks about that there are certain presiding deities who arrange the post-mortem journey of the soul. So the idea is that, so they are called the Ativahini Devatas. Ativahini, Vahan means vehicle, and Ativahini means who arrange the passage of the soul after the post-mortem journey. So it is mentioned there are, I think, 21 or 11 such different presiding or demigods who take control of different times. So here Agni is mentioned. So Agni is also one of the Ativahini Devata. So what happens is, so we know that Kartik month is a very auspicious spiritual time. So at that time, it is mentioned that the mercy of Radharani is there abundantly, and whatever we do in this time, it gets, the result is multiplied many times. That's how it is mentioned. Of course, I don't understand that very logically, because we see that we know that the spirituality is not about numbers. The numbers, mathematics is for material things. So how that works at the spiritual realm, that it gets multiplied by whatever 1000, some people say 1000 times, 10,000 times. I don't know how the material calculations apply for spiritual things, but whatever. We do agree and we believe that in the month of Kartik, we should do more japa, we should do more spiritual activities, and we'll get a better result. It's very auspicious for us. Not auspicious in the material mundane sense, but auspicious from a spiritual perspective. So similarly, at different times, there is the effect of different presiding deities. So if a particular person passes during this particular time that is mentioned, so Uttarayan is also the time when who passed away? A glorious devotee in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is mentioned.
Bhishma Dev.
Bhishma Dev, yeah. So this is the time when Bhishma Dev also passed away. It is mentioned that was the most auspicious time to pass away, when actually Bhishma Dev departed. So this is considered from a material perspective, it is considered to be extremely important, not important in the sense, very auspicious. So if Prabhupada explains that if someone passes by arrangement, so we understand that if there are certain, I mentioned that how yoga is like a technique. One who has mastered the technique, he will be able to control the time of his death when he has to leave the body. But one who has not mastered the technique, then he has to rely on chance, that by chance, if he can pass, he can try, and then, from his side. But if he has not mastered the technique, he may or may not be able to pass on that time. Of course, people who are not yogis, they may accidentally sometimes pass away at a particular time. And if that's an auspicious time, they will attain an auspicious destination. So this is like a material mundane logic. But for devotees, it's not like that. They don't have to worry too much about what time they are passing away. I had one more thought to add here. Somehow I missed that thought. Anyway, are there any questions or comments or anything anyone would like to mention? Okay, yes, Prabhuji, go ahead.
Yes, Prabhu, I have a question. So, about the 6 months you mentioned, it's a long time, So, we can see so many like rascals or worst kind of people. What if they die on that time?
Well, according to what I'm reading here, they will attain a good destination. But it's not. So it's not that in the material world everything is happening by chance. No, nothing actually happens by chance. There is a precise, arrangement. Material nature is not something that it will let the person go if he is like a very seriously a rascal person. Later, Krishna will talk about that for the demoniac people, how he makes sure that they go lower and lower in the lower planets and they suffer. So nothing actually happens by chance. If someone is going at a particular time, we have to understand that he has some, it could be a material piety or it could be spiritual piety. We don't know. We can't see, we can't judge people. We do.
Or mercy.
Right. It could be anything. So I think we were discussing the other day also that Brahma can also, so there are 2 or 3 ways to become Brahma. One is, of course, if a person has elevated himself, is a pure, he's a good devotee, excellent devotee, and by the mercy of the Lord, he has attained the post of Brahma. Another way to become Brahma is by material piety, that you perform these sacrifices, these number of sacrifices, and you do all what that is needed to qualify for the post of Brahma. And then in the next Brahma, you can become the next Brahma. And the third way is, of course, when nobody is qualified, there is no devotee, there is no materially pious qualified person available, then Krishna himself takes the charge of Brahma. So similarly, here also, either it could be material piety or it could be spiritual piety, we don't know, but it's not by chance. Everything, material nature has the perfect arrangement. Of course, there are other principles also that apply. So Krishna says that, if the law of last thought is also there, that whatever you are thinking at the time of death, that destination you will attain for sure. So that will also apply over here. So it's not just one thing that will matter. Of course, this is one of the important things, but this is not the only thing. There are other factors that also will come into the picture.
Prabhu, so in the verse, does it say they'll reach auspicious destination, or they'll not have to come back?
Those who know the Supreme, who attain the Supreme by passing away, so attain that Supreme, that's how it is mentioned. So, and Prabhupada also says that, right, in the yeah, he says for him to attain the impersonal Brahma Jyotir, either accidentally or it is possible for him to attain the impersonal Brahma Jyotir. So Brahma Jyoti can be attained, so they will attain a spiritual destination. Even Brahma Jyoti is spiritual. It's not mundane, it's not material. So if they pass at that particular moment, they will be able to attain. But of course, again, as I said, the law of last thought has to be there. So many things have to be perfect, correct. So it's not just this. There are other things also that will come into picture.
Okay, but Prabhu, very last thing, I think I mean, this can confuse a lot of people. All those things for karma yogis, not bhakti yogis. Like I mean, I'm not a yogi, but I'm saying those who follows path of bhakti is not applicable to us. We don't have to think about those. Is that the case?
For pure devotees, Prabhupada says, for the pure devotee in Krishna consciousness, there is no fear of returning. Now we can know what our level is. Are we pure or not? So if we are completely dependent on Krishna, then Krishna will take care. But if we are not pure in devotion, we have other things going on, we have other agendas, then yeah, then we might have to get another chance. So, but at least one thing is confirmed, even whoever has practiced devotion, even a little, swalpam api asya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. That is one place Krishna says right in the 2nd chapter. Then in the 6th chapter also Krishna talks about that how, even if a yogi is, he is frustrated in his endeavor in one life, then he gets another chance. So either he will attain to the higher planets, and there he will enjoy for some time. Then again he will take birth in a pious family, or he will directly take birth into a family of practicing spiritualists, and from there he will make progress. So we see the case of Bharat Maharaj is also like that. So he failed, but he got another chance, and then from another chance he makes sure that he doesn't have to come back. So that consciousness is actually preserved. I think Gitamala Bhattaji has mentioned many times about the case of a devotee, that how the devotee was attracted to a woman, and then he took birth again as a woman in the next life. That devotee is still there in UK. So that devotee talks a lot about, that's a Mataji now, but she talks a lot about her previous life as a man. So such cases are there.
Or she remembers?
Yes.
Interesting.
Oh, yeah, I can text you that in UK.
But did someone verify that, Mataji?
Oh, yeah, she's a disciple of Bhaktichara Maharaj. Now,
I know. I'm saying like
but he was a disciple of Srila Prabhupada. And after he died in an accident, Srila Prabhupada said, do some ceremony for him, and he was very friendly with who's that big singer in Kirtan? Forget
George
his
Harrison?
name. No, in England, he passed away
Janvi?
now.
No, okay.
No, I'll Google him and tell you. And then now his name began with something R in his previous life also. Now in this life, he has a female name with R. He was born as a UK white person. again. And then, no, in his previous life, he was a white person. And then he was born as an Indian lady, because he was attracted to an Indian lady, in his previous life. An Indian devotee, of course, but he died before,
Yeah, so the important thing is that in this life also she is a devotee. So
Yeah, she's a
she is-
devotee, right. But
So
she goes through some horrendous trauma, and then somehow she hears Krishna speaking to her, and that's how she comes to, as an Indian person, she comes to ISKCON, and gets connected with ISKCON. And then she starts remembering things. She even goes to her previous house and remembers things from the window that she used to have in her room. She remembers her room. She remembers the view from her room and everything. She goes to that place. It had become a pub now, So there's a detail. She's Bhakti Charu Smara. In Bhakti Charu, even jokingly asked her once, who were you thinking of? Which woman were you thinking of? Because he knew she was born as a woman now. So it's a true story, In fact, Devaki Mataji also has done a lecture on it. She has a lecture. Devaki Mataji has done a 4-part series on death. Very nice series. And she gives many examples of even her father, after he passed away, how he came in like a subtle presence to her and things like that. So she's spoken many cases like this. And then she has done a lot of research on death from the Shastras itself. And she has done a 4-part audio series on death.
Hare Krishna,
she-
Prabhu.
Hmm.
Oh, sorry, Mataji. Go
Right,
ahead.
what were you saying? No,
Hare
I'm
Krishna,
done.
Prabhu. Please accept my humble obeisances.
Hare Krishna,
My question would be how you measure per devotee. So you measure by time. How well, I know probably you can't really judge, but my question, what is the per devotee, like practicing 40 years, 50 years, or how you know it's a pure devotee, or how Krishna measures, like.
yeah, so okay, how Krishna measures. Okay, so for Krishna, he is right in the heart, so he can understand who is a pure devotee and who is not. He can know our thoughts, who he can understand. So the pure devotee is, so there is a definition that comes that ahetuki apratihata bhakti, who is doing that, is actually a pure devotee. Ahetuki means that there are no expectations from Krishna. I'm doing the bhakti, and whatever results I get, I don't care. I am doing bhakti because I love Krishna. That is ahetuki. And apratihata means that my understanding is that no one other than Krishna. Krishna is my only Lord. So one is there has to be no expectation, and one is so completely pure motivation, pure desires, and very very much attraction to Krishna. So that is like a pure devotee. So whatever we are doing, whatever we are, so Krishna also talks about it in the 9th chapter briefly. Yat karosi yad ashnasi yad johosi dadasi yat tapashyasi konteya tat purushmad arpanam. So everything that you do, everything that you eat, everything that you offer as sacrifice, just do it for me. Offer it to me first, and then you accept it. Like that he mentions. So if a person is completely devoted to Krishna in mind, body, and words, he thinks about Krishna, he speaks about Krishna, and he does service for Krishna. So such a person, in my, even if he is not pure at the moment, he will become pure by practicing that. So another definition of the pure devotee that comes in the Bhagavad Gita itself is I'm missing the verse. In the 12th chapter, he says that who is whose mind and intelligence is devoted to Krishna all the time. So that such a person is like a pure devotee. And Krishna says that if you cannot be like that, then practice. Atha chittam samadhatum na shaknoshi maistiram abhyasa yogena tato mamechaptum dhananjaya. And actually, if you cannot think about me all the time, then at least practice. And by practice, you try to attain a desire, try to develop a desire to attain me. So that's how Krishna. So then in the 12th chapter, he gives levels, but the topmost level is a person whose mind and intelligence is devoted to Krishna completely. He thinks for Krishna, he works for Krishna. So Prabhupada also writes in the introduction to the Gita, the art of Krishna consciousness is total absorption of mind and intelligence in Krishna. So he gives further details to it. He says that we don't act by our hands and legs. We act. So whenever we have to act, that the thought of acting is first conceived in our mind and through our intelligence. So if in the mind and intelligence Krishna is there, then whatever we do, that will automatically happen for Krishna. So that's how Prabhupada also writes. So that's my understanding, Mataji. Of course, this can be explained at various levels. Different devotees can try to explain it differently, but that's just my understanding of what a pure devotee is.
Thank you so much. I appreciate Prabhu. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So I know we don't have much time left. So Mataji,
Tribu, I posted
go ahead, Mataji.
the story, the reincarnation story. It's on bhakticharudmaharaj.com's website. And Raghavadass, I forget what her name was when she was born as a girl.
Oh, he was a brahmachari.
He was a brahmachari, Raghavadass brahmachari.
Oh, quite young when he passed away.
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
even
very
20
young.
years. 18 years.
Maybe just 20 or so. And Tribhuvanattas was his kind of mentor, And then she meets Tribhuvanattas, and she's very good at mridangam, because he used to play mridangam with Tribhuvanattas. Tribhuvanattas is a famous Kirtaniya in London. He passed away some years ago, I think.
He was also Prabhupada disciple.
Prabhupada disciple, yes. So this boy also in fact, he hadn't finished his fire sacrifice. He had just been initiated by Srila Prabhupada, died before the fire sacrifice.
Oh. So I was talking about Bhishma Dev, and we don't have time to go to the next verse. Of course, I would have liked to do it because it's in the continuation, but that's fine. So we see that Bhishma Dev passed away at a particular time. Of course, he was a devotee, So why does he have to pass away at a particular time when he was a devotee? So many times this question comes up. So I try to understand myself. So I've found one place where one of the acharyas talk about it. So he says that actually for a devotee, for a pure devotee like Bhishma Dev, he's like a Mahajan. He's not an ordinary pure devotee. He's in the textbook kind of Mahajan devotee. So he's mentioned as one of the Mahajans, 12 Mahajans in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So he says that, for a devotee like Bhishma Dev, when he has to pass, even the material, from material perspective also, his passing is glorious. It's not ordinary passing. He's passing at the most auspicious moment that is possible. So that's how it is mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, Bhishma Dev is passing away. If you look at it from the way I understood in the Srimad Bhagavatam, is that it's not that Bhishma Dev was waiting for that moment to come. When Bhishma Dev was to pass, it is mentioned that of course Krishna goes there along with the Pandavas. So the backstory is that after the Mahabharata war was over, what had happened to Arjuna before the war, the same thing happens to Yudhishthir. So he is lamenting that so many people have died. Nobody survived actually. Only 10 people survived the war. So many 14 or 18 Akshauhini Sena was annihilated. And all the warriors on the side of the Pandavas and the Kauravas, except for the 10 people, they all were killed in the battle. So Yudhishthir was completely devastated that so much, devastation has happened due to this war. And that's just because I wanted to rule. I wanted the kingdom. So that was his, he was in so much lamentation, and Krishna does try to pacify him, but Arjuna was pacified by Krishna, but Krishna was not able to pacify Yudhishthir. Of course, that's also a Leela, the Lord, because Krishna wanted Yudhishthir to hear from Bhishma Dev, because Bhishma Dev was about to leave the body. So then Krishna and the Pandavas, they all go to Bhishma Dev, and that time Bhishma Dev was he was waiting in one sense for Krishna to come. So Bhishma Dev was a very exalted devotee. At multiple times during the war, he had warned Duryodhan that actually Krishna is not ordinary; he is the supreme Lord. Even now there is time. He says this to Duryodhana multiple times, but Duryodhana didn't listen to Bhishma Dev. So excuse me. So when Krishna comes, it's a very touching description that comes in the Srimad Bhagavatam. First of all, Bhishma Dev's situation was, from a material perspective, it was very pathetic. In every inch of his body, there was an arrow piercing his body, and he was in a bed of an arrow. You can understand how much pain he would be in. And today, at least, we have all those painkillers and everything that is given. At that time, there were no painkillers that were given to Bhishma Dev. He was just there. Of course, he was not crying or anything. He was just bearing all the pain. So by material, and if you, from a material perspective, you can understand how much pain he was in. But still, when Krishna and the Pandava arrives, and it is mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam itself, that all the important personalities from all over the universe had come, because Bhishma Dev was understood to be a very, very, even if people didn't understand him as a devotee, but still they understood that Bhishma Dev is a very exalted person, because he had taken a very severe vow, because of which he had given the name of Bhishma. So when Krishna comes over there, first of all, he identifies Krishna, he offers prayers, of course, but he says first, what is that verse? I'm missing the verse, but he says that actually this is Esha vai Bhagwan Sakshat Adyo Narayana Pyuman. He says this Krishna is Bhagwan Sakshat. And then we can say, okay, Vishnu is also Bhagwan Sakshat, Narayan is also Bhagwan Sakshat, but he says Adyo Narayana Pyuman. He is the origin of Lord Narayan also. He is, he is actually the Sakshat Bhagwan. So he understands Krishna's position. He glorifies him in that way. And then when Krishna describes to Yudhishthir, to Bhishma Dev, what is the situation of Yudhishthir? So at that time, he says that you please instruct to him. So then Bhishma Dev understands that this is Krishna's will. So I have to, follow it. So then he starts speaking to Yudhishthir. So he says that first of all, he says, Tathapi ekanta bhakteshu pashya bhupanukampatam sakshat Krishna darshanagato. He says that, because I'm an unalloyed devotee of Krishna, it's very categorical there. Bhishma Dev says that, Tathapi ekanta bhakteshu, I am his ekanta, I am his unalloyed devotee. And just because I'm his unalloyed devotee, and I have to, this number for me, I have to pass now. That's wherefore he himself has come. Sakshat Krishna darshanagato. He has himself come to give me his own darshan. That's how he tells to Yudhishthir. Then he speaks about Raj Dharma over there. What is the duty of the king? And that is the most elaborate section of the Mahabharata. This Anushasan Parv that you see, it becomes like the biggest section in the Mahabharata. Half of the Mahabharata is actually the instructions that are kind of given by Bhishma Dev to Yudhishthir. So what happens in the storyline is, after the instructions are done, he has offered his prayers to Krishna, everything is done. So now there's nothing more to be done over there. So now he is ready to leave. And when he's ready to leave, and it just happens at that time, it is mentioned, the way it is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam is that Bhishma Dev saw that everything is over, he has offered his prayers, and then the material, from material perspective, the time is also very auspicious. So he then finally decides to leave the body at that time. So then he puts Krishna in his attention, and then he focuses his mind on Krishna, and then he leaves the body. So it's not that Bhishma Dev was waiting for the right time to come. It's, at least the way I understood in the Srimad Bhagavatam, that is the way it is described is, it just happened by that. Of course, Bhishma Dev's passing away is very glorious in one sense. So it may be said that, for his passing away, the time had, the stars had aligned in that way. So that, when Krishna had to appear, it's not that Krishna waits for a particular moment to come, but the star aligns in that way. And that time becomes the most auspicious time in the universe at that time when Krishna had to come. Similarly, when Bhishma Dev had to pass, because he was such an elevated devotee, the time and the stars had aligned in that way. And all the important personalities were present at that time when Bhishma Dev was departing from the world.
Prabhu, I know we're running out of time, but this is such an, like, you know, I have burning question. Gitamala Mata, you asked this question in our Chaitanya Charitamrita class, but it did not get answered for the sake of time. But anyway, Prabhu, what I was meditating on the question. It didn't make sense to me either. But I was thinking more like, you know, I mean, of course, Vishwadev is one of the, like, as you mentioned, is one of the highest devotees. However, when I look at this, no offense, hopefully Krishna will understand my mind. I look at his, like, life. It doesn't look like he was like that high level devotee. I mean, of course, he was a karma yogi. For example, he took a vow. Okay, so he took a vow, and to keep his vow, he wanted to make any sacrifice. So that way, of course, he's very glorious, right? However, a real devotee, like, doesn't care about whether he go to heaven or hell or whatever. For example, if you look at Gaura Lila, you heard of that during Mahaprakash Lila. I forgot that Basudev. Yes. So Basudev asked to Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu asked for, like, you know, okay, ask for a boon. He said, okay, if I did little bit of good work, take all those things and take every jivas to with you, and let me suffer for their, you know, sinful reactions. So this is the highest level devotees. So where, like, we see the Vishwadev, like, he could have saved Draupadi, he did not, right? He didn't have to fight for the Kauravas. If he did not, then probably there wouldn't be any war. So who should he blame for all the people who died? So again, and if you go back, I mean, he is the one who forced what's called Gandharaj, right, to, like, you know, so that he has to. I mean, he was scared, right? That so that he has to make his daughter married with a, like, you know, blind king. So I mean, when I read, like, don't see him as, like, okay, like a real devotee. What we understand by devotee, he might be a karma yogi. He did it work perfectly. But anyway, Prabhu, you got my point.
Yeah, so so this has to be understood. Now, this is a very elaborate subject. I'll try to address this briefly. So there is an external vision of things and there is an internal vision of things. The internal vision is given by acharyas. The external vision is what we see in the Mahabharata. So there are different scriptures, and the different scriptures talk about things from a different perspective. So Mahabharata talks about, you know, primarily Mahabharata talks about dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. And then, you know, whatever you see in the Mahabharata, you will see it from that perspective. So it doesn't, so it's just a different way of understanding or looking at things, the way you look at in the Mahabharata. Now, if you really want to understand the glories of Bhishmadev, you have to read how acharyas have described that why he did what he did. So first of all, you know, he had taken a severe vow, and, you know, there was no need to take that vow. So there is a backstory that comes in the Mahabharata itself, that in his previous life he's a Vasu. It's a well-known fact, but, you know, he kinds of he is traveling with other Vasus and his wife, and I think it was Vashishta. So the Vashishta had a cow which is like you know, which can do anything. You know, you ask for that Kamadhenu, as we say. So this wife of his name was Devu at that time. Bhishma Dev's name was Devu. So this Devu was actually, he becomes Bhishma Dev in the next life. So his wife says that I want that cow, and his Devu says, I don't go into the entire pastime, but this Devu tells the other Vasus to get the cow forcibly from Vashishta. So then the Vasus, they just follow. So he was like the leader of the Vasus. So the other Vasus follow his instruction and they get the cow. And Vashishta becomes very angry, and then he curses that because in the influence of your wife, you do not even regard for a sage like me. You know, what kind of a person you are. You are not fit for becoming a devta, and you should take birth as a human being on you know, on this planet Earth, or in the sense they say Mrityu Lok. Mrityu Lok is considered to be Earth, because Mrityu comes very fast. Mrityu is there in other planets also, but here it's relatively very fast. You know, just 100 years lifespan or whatever. So then he comes down as Bhishma, and then another part of the curse was that because you are so attached to your wife that you are doing everything, even sinful things you're doing because of her, then you will not have the association of any woman in your next life. That's the curse that he was given, and accordingly he comes as Bhishma, of course, because he was a Vasu. Then after the curse was given, then he goes to Ganga, and then he requests that I don't want to be born from the womb of a worldly woman. Can you please help me and, you know, make me take birth from your own womb? So then another story starts, that how Ganga, then she attracts Shantanu, and then through Shantanu and Ganga, Bhishma Dev appears there, so that he is not contaminated. So that is like the backstory, that why he takes that vow. So then later he takes the vow of remaining a celibate all his life. And then after that, looking at the Draupadi's case, now the Draupadi's case was very peculiar. We don't have much time to discuss it, but what happens in Draupadi's case is, when all this was happening, so the Bhishma Dev, he is just like an assistant to the king. He's not the king actually. So we have to understand, he's like a minister. So he is always giving the right counseling to the king, but the king has to act on what he is saying. He cannot go against. That was one of the vow that he had taken, that whoever becomes the king of Hastinapur, I will assist him, and I'll make sure that the boundaries of the kingdom are guarded. So he even before this whole pastime of this gambling match had happened, he had told very severely that this should not be done. You should not have this gambling match. And Vidura had also told this to Dhritarashtra, but Dhritarashtra doesn't listen. So then they call, and then we know what happened in the gambling match. And of course, when Draupadi was being dragged, at that time, everybody was looking at Dhritarashtra, that because he is the king, he is the authority at that time. Unless he says something, nobody can overrule Dhritarashtra over there. So when Draupadi comes and she requests, she begs everyone, she also goes to Bhishma Dev, and then she says that, so she puts a technical question to Bhishma Dev. So she says that actually, when Yudhishthira has lost himself, he is not his own master. How could he be my master? And how could he gamble me in the gambling match? So this is the question she asked to Bhishma, and Bhishma says that, so there are two principles. He says that one principle is that what you are saying is correct. A person who is not his own master, he cannot be a master of anyone else. But the another principle is that wife is always considered to be the property, or subordinate to the husband. So husband is always considered to be the master of the wife. So I don't know which principle is greater here. So I'm not able to understand over here. That's how he puts it. And then of course the real reason is that Dhritarashtra is also not saying anything. Now the Acharya has given an additional point over there, and why Bhishma Deva had to fight from the Pandava side. First of all, he had taken a vow that whoever is the king of Hastinapur, he will be fighting from that side. But Acharya explained that Krishna wanted Bhishma Dev to be fighting from the opposite side, because Bhishma Dev was considered to be the most powerful warrior on the planet Earth at that time. He had defeated even Parshuram. Parshuram was understood to be like an avatar of Lord Vishnu, But Bhishma Dev was so powerful. Of course, he was a disciple of Parshuram, but he had defeated Parshuram also. So nobody could defeat Bhishma. But what Krishna wanted to illustrate was that if someone stands against Dharma, against Krishna, no matter how strong of a warrior he could be, he will be also destroyed. So in order to do that, Krishna wanted Bhishma Dev to fight from the side of the Kauravas. And that's how Bhishma also understood the will of the Lord. And then he took up that service to fight from the side of the Kauravas against Krishna, so that it can be illustrated to the world that whoever comes against Krishna, no matter how powerful that person is, he cannot sustain. So that's how, in a short, I can tell you this is what it is. Of course, this is a very broad topic, and there could be questions and counter questions and counter questions. But
yes, right, Prabhu. Yes, for the sake of time. But I just want to make one comment, and then we can leave it for the next Prabhu. So I also thought about what you said, that maybe Krishna's desire, because the vow itself, it can be broken. For devotees, it does not matter. The most he will go to hell. So devotee should not care. But the Krishna's will part. So if you say it's Krishna's will, which I thought of, then we should, worship what is called Hiranyakashipu too. We should worship Ravan too, because we can say, okay, they knew Krishna's will, so there
is a significant difference between what Ravan was doing and Hiranyakashipu was doing, and what Bhishma
I understand, yes,
was doing.
But still, what I'm saying, I know you don't have time, but we understand. But there are so many things. I'm saying he's definitely a very worshipful person, but I think I cannot accept him. Like when he imagine like a devotee, pure devotee, we see like, in actually I see in my imagination, I see like a most perfect person, not like, of course Vishnudev was perfect person, but he was like, to me it's like a karma yogi, not bhakti yogi. That's my best. Prabhu, I know, please later on, please enlighten me on that. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Okay, all right. Any other questions, comments before we end?
I just wanted to ask, isn't this the same cow that Vishwamitra also tried to capture?
Yes, yeah, you are right. Vishwamitra. Yep.
Okay, so this cow is giving a lot of people trouble.
Yeah, so
cow,
right. Vishwamitra also tried that and then he couldn't. So then Vishwamitra was a king. What was his name before he became Vishwamitra? I forgot the name of the king. But anyway, so whoever that king was.
right. I
And there
just
is a
noticed that the same cow gave people trouble. Okay, thank you.
yeah.
Hare Krishna. Appreciate you.
Right. I think you can end here. Thank you so much. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Ananta koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you everyone.
Prabhu ki jai. Hare Krishna.